Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be going over the tier 6 item prio for Hyjal and Black Temple. If it runs long, I might split it off into 2 videos. But yeah, we're going to be covering the gems, the crafted gear, the Hearts of Darkness, the trash loot, and then obviously all of the bosses for Black Temple and Mount Hyjal. Appreciate everyone who helped in the making of this list. I did a lot of work on this sheet on stream live at twitch.tv/Zatar_wow. And yeah, appreciate all the people that gave input in improving this list. And this has been a project I've been working on for quite some time. So, pretty happy with how the list has come out. A couple things to mention. Number one, this list is not made for speedrunning. So when it comes to some of the items, especially those that are shared between healers and DPS, you're going to see that a lot of the healing items are going to be going to healers. And that's because this isn't designed for speedrunning, and this is designed with most guilds in mind. So just keep that in mind, that when we do get to some of the options, I will explain, potentially the avenue that you can go if you're looking to speedrun or do a lot of, just parse really high damage numbers rather than, spreading the loot between the healers. But just keep that in mind, that this is designed for the majority of the player base when it comes to distributing the loot. And there is going to be some decisions that are based on fairness and spreading out items. If there's one class that doesn't get very much, I might move them higher on an item, and I'll make sure to point that out when that's happening. Besides that, that's really all. Make sure to check the link in the description to the actual page I have here. You can follow this along. I personally found the spreadsheet a little cumbersome, so this time I've got pictures and words here up on my site. So for me at least, that's a lot easier. So check that out. I don't make any money off the site, so I'm not trying to funnel people to the site. It's just actually easier for me to go through everything like this. And then also I have a list to all of the BIS lists, a little compilation of a bunch of different BIS lists. If you guys are interested in all the BIS lists used from all the different class discords, great resource there. That's also linked on this page. Last thing, I guess, there's a change log. If I change anything, it'll go in the change log. If you're watching this in 6 months, check the change log, see if anything changed. While I'm confident with a lot of the decisions made in the sheet, there's a lot of BIS lists that might change. And obviously, if a BIS list changes and it goes up on Wowhead and everyone looks at it, all of the people playing that class are probably going to want that item. So even though there's a few items that are neck and neck, right now, a lot of the BIS lists are leaning towards one option. If that changes, I'll make sure to reflect that in the change log. All right, next on to the Hearts of, I guess maybe we'll start with gems first. So there's gems coming out in the phase. I don't know how often these are going to drop because they were bugged on the PTR run I did and none dropped. And apparently they're supposed to be more common. But yeah, when it comes to gems, the only thing I would say is I wouldn't think about it too much. I would really just make sure that you're giving gems, especially early on when you don't have many. Make sure to give them to people that are going to put them in best in slot items for the whole phase. So if you're just not, starting out, you're going to give them to people that have items like Belt of 100 Deaths. That's like BIS the entire phase. And you also want to make sure that you're giving them, they're getting socketed into slots where they're not going to be regemmed if that player needs to change hit or needs to change their meta gem. So make sure that you're using the most of the gem and it doesn't get wasted, whether the item's replaced or whether the gem has to get slotted out. So that's the only thing to be cautious of maybe early on. But besides that, it doesn't super matter. A lot of it explains itself. A lot of the blue ones are going to go to tanks because they gem stamina. The yellow ones are going to be great for mages and for your warriors. The red ones are going to be great for all your casters gemming spell power and your, the classes that gem strength like rets and enhancements and all that. So that's pretty much the only thing I'll mention when it comes to gems. Next, Heart of Darknesses. Now, we don't know the exact amount of shadow resistance there's no general rule of thumb established just yet because the PTR has been going up and down. But hopefully by the time you maybe see this video, there's a set in stone number of shadow resistance that everyone's going for on Mother Shiraz. Regardless of that, the important thing to remember is that the cloak and the wrist are the best deal. You get 40 shadow resistance for 1 Heart of Darkness. And just to back up a little bit, A Heart of Darkness is going to be similar to the vortexes that dropped in SSC and TK, and these are used to craft a bunch of different crafted patterns. And the reason I'm talking about shadow resistance is there is a boss called Mother Shiraz that needs shadow resistance to kill her. Now, some guilds might get away with no shadow resistance, but they're going to be using a lot of engineering gadgets to do so. And I think the average guild is definitely going to want some shadow resistance. So the first priority with these Heart of Darknesses, even though you can craft a lot of different items, I think the number one thing guilds should be doing is making sure they get their shadow resistance squared away for Mother Shiraz. That way they don't have a roadblock that they can't pass just because they don't have the shadow resistance. So first thing you're going to do is make sure you get enough SR to clear the boss. Always make cloaks and wrists first. There is a leather cloth mail plate equivalent to each of the wrist, belt, boot, and legs. But again, you want to look at the efficiency of shadow resistance per heart. Cloak, 1 heart, 40 shadow res. Wrists, 1 heart, 40 shadow res. Boots, 2 hearts, 54 shadow resistance, which is almost half the amount of shadow resistance per heart. And legs, 24 shadow resistance per heart. So the difference between the boots and the belt and the legs, these are all kind of close. So it doesn't matter between these three which you make. Technically, the boots and the belt are more efficient, but you can look at the class and the character as you're giving them their shadow resistance and figure out maybe what slot would work best for them. But the wrists and the cloak are going to be the most efficient slots and the ones you should make most. Now, if you're trying to figure out who to give shadow resistance to, tanks do not need it, as they're going to be soaking the cleave. The mages and the rogues can run less shadow resistance because the rogue can cloak and sprint away from the dangerous effect, and the mages can blink out. Also keep in mind, if you do have engineers that have rocket boots and nigh invulnerability belt, that would be great for them to use on this fight. And if they're going to be using rocket boots, they potentially would need less shadow resistance, and you'd hope they just don't get it twice in a row. Next, but that's pretty much wrapping it up for the shadow resistance. Next, we've got the crafted items, and I'm just going to kind of gloss through these, and then I'll go through each item and kind of which class wants it most. The wrists are probably the closest to this phase's Belt of Blasting. These are best in slot for every caster but a mage right now. And the main thing is, when it comes to the Nimble Thought, you're just going to be, once you get through the Shadow Res, this is probably your go-to. You're going to be spreading this out across all your different casters. These wrists are also insane for Resto Shamans. These are the male equivalent, but a Resto Shaman would be okay using the cloth or the leather equivalent as well. The main thing is the Resto Shamans really like that haste. Other great wrists, these wrists are at bis level and are either close bis or bis by a slight margin. Right now, a lot of the priest lists do like to use the haste wrists, and the enhancement and rets are using haste wrists as well. But there's a lot of very close alternatives for each of those classes, so that could be subject to change. For enhancement specifically, they can opt to get the leather haste wrists as well as the male ones, and the leather ones are going to be pretty much the same thing for enhancement. However, rets do want the male version. The male version is better for them than the leather. Shoulders, again, this is another near bis item for enhance. It's considered best in slot for enhancement right now, in addition to the leather version of the shoulders, but it is close to some of the other options like Shoulders of Stranger from last phase. That's pretty much it for this tier. Keep in mind that a Resto Druid might have some interest in the haste wrist as well, depending on how much haste they currently have. And we'll talk about that probably here. So for haste, Resto Druids are trying to hit 113 haste. If a Resto Druid gets exactly 113 haste, their life bloom, they're able to maintain an extra life bloom. They're able to cast so fast that they can keep up an extra life bloom, which is a really big deal. Now, the other breakpoint to worry about is the Shadow Priest. Shadow Priests want 146 haste. A little more is fine, or even a decent bit more is fine, but exactly 146 is a really big break point for them, and it has to do with how Mind Flay clipping works and the cooldown of their abilities, such as like Mind Blast. And so if you're playing a Shadow Priest, having exactly 146 haste is going to be really good, and the difference between 145 haste and 146 is actually a big difference. So the reason I mention all this is throughout all of the gear, we're going to be mentioning, if this gifts your Shadow Priest to 146 haste, that might be a bigger deal for them. Same thing with Druids. If an item's going to get them to 113 haste, that's a really big deal. So when it comes to these shoulders, something like Mantle of Nimble Thought is not considered best in slot for any class, but can be a big jump for a Shadow Priest depending on their current gear. Likewise, the Swift Heal Mantle and the Shoulders of Renewed Life, these are not considered best in slot. However, they are going to be an item that is really nice if you're able to hook up a priest early on, especially if they're far away from tier. These shoulders are a nice upgrade for them, and especially if you can get your druid to 113 haste, both of these are good. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned yet for this crafted gear, the wrists are BOE and the shoulders are BOP. So the wrists you're going to be making and crafting and handing them out. The shoulders require the profession, and you need to make sure you get your pattern, and then you're able to have the profession. Then you can make the items. They still take Heart of Darknesses though. Besides that, you also potentially could use haste shoulders on a Resto Shaman as well. There's the few different versions of them if they have leather working, but they're going to, or tailoring even, but they're not going to be best in slot, but another option. When we go to the kind of the worst of the options, unfortunately, Paladins right now are not. It's not looking like Paladins are going to be going for haste, especially if they're tank healing. Paladins with haste are going to cast really fast, but that doesn't turn out to be as effective when casting Holy Lights on the tank. It is very effective for spamming Flash of Light. So depending on what your Holy Paladin's doing in the raid, they could want a lot of haste, but in the vast majority of guilds, a Holy Paladin is going to be tank healing. And if they're tank healing, they don't want the haste. They want pure stats and mana and healing. So that is why these are considered to be not as good. And the Swift Steel Bracers are just not great. The male version is going to give more damage to even a warrior and a ret. So that's kind of the overview. Once you start crafting items, you're going to be making a lot of the caster wrists. You're going to be giving your Resto Shamans haste wrists. And then moving on to the items that are best in slot, that are really good, and then kind of going down the list. Can deviate from the list though if you can get some haste onto some of your casters, specifically your Resto Druid and your Shadow Priest to hit the breakpoint. All right, now if we want to go on each item, I just wanted to make sure that it was clear which classes want each item. Swift Strike Bracers are best in slot for enhancement. They're kind of tied with the lightning reflexes, and so whichever one your enhanced can get their hands on is going to be really good for them. They'd be happy with either. So whichever one you can get is what the enhanced is going to want. Now, rogues can use Swift Strike as a backup, but it's not best in slot, so not a priority. It's not. It's a nice temp upgrade, but not best in slot. Now, the Bindings of Lightning Reflexes, these are BIS for enhancement and ret. Both classes have alternative wrists they could use, but right now these are best in slot for those classes. Hunters and warriors can use these as a potential temp upgrade. I've heard some lists or some people talking about how they could potentially be good for warrior, depending on if how good the value of haste is, and that's something that right now they're not simming very well, but that could potentially change. Over to the Swift Steel Bracers, these suck, don't worry about them. Onto the shoulders, and again, you need to be the profession to craft these, and they're bind on pickup. These shoulders are BIS quality for enhance. Both the mail and the leather option are both really good for enhance. Rets also can use these shoulders, but they're not best in slot for them, but they are close to best in slot. And hunters can also use this as a temp upgrade. Warriors could potentially have some interest in this shoulder as well, but not. They'd probably rather have Swift Steel, but yeah, either way, it's not BIS for the warrior. On to Nimble Thought. So these are the haste wrists. Shadow Priest is the only class that doesn't have a close alternative. So you could prio this to Shadow Priest. They do want a lot of haste. It'd be fine to give to really any caster that doesn't have Mindstone wristbands. The best wrist from last phase. Now keep in mind, because everyone's going to get this, you might as well give it out to the biggest upgrade. Keep in mind that these wrists are they are best in slot for every class but mage, but there are some different alternatives that can be used. There's a hit wrist and there's a crit wrist. So it doesn't super matter. You can give it to your Shadow Priest, especially if they need the haste at that point. If they don't need the haste, you could really give it to anyone here, but not a big deal. Just pass them out, hand them out. Everyone's going to get them, and great item. Nimble Thought, again, we talked about this a little bit before, but a Shadow Priest can use this to hit their haste threshold. Warlocks can use this as a temp upgrade. A lot of your Warlocks might not have tier 5 chests, or rather tier 5 shoulders, because they were using tier 4. So this could be a nice upgrade if they're starting to break set bonuses. This could be a big upgrade for a Warlock that doesn't have good shoulders. Boomies can also use this as a temp upgrade as well. And you can still give it to a Shadow Priest even if they don't hit their haste breakpoint, but it's not as big of a deal. On to the wrists. These wrists are great for shamans and priests. Shamans are down for any of the wrists, but would obviously prefer the male ones. So hopefully you're able to get those for the rest of shaman. But really any of the haste wrists are going to be great for the shaman. Now a priest also really likes haste wrists, and they're listed as BIS. Both priests and druids have alternatives that are not haste option, that are healing and spirit. The druid is going to prefer the option that has the socket and the spirit and the healing, but that's only after they have 113 haste. Before then, it can be a really big deal to get the haste, and the druid is, there's a decent chance you're going to be making these wrists, or the renewed life wrists, which, preferably the leather for the druid. If you can get that druid to 113 haste, these wrists could be really good. So onto the wrists for plate, again, if not great for a paladin, unless they're going for Flash of Light build. Shoulders, we talked about the shoulders a little bit before. Priests are probably going to sit on these for a while because they're going to be lower on tier. Druids are also lower on tier, could potentially sit on these for a while. Druids are down with the leather or the cloth version. The cloth version is better, but the leather version has more haste on it. So if they need that exact amount of haste, they can go for the leather. If not, they can go cloth. But really that's going to depend on their profession. I doubt you're going to have druids respecking just for the exact shoulder, but you might. But yeah, if your druid's leatherworking, they go for this one. If they're tailoring, they go for this one. If they're neither, well, they can't get them. So Living Earth shoulders, again, temp upgrade for an Archam, not best in slot. They want their tier, but can be a temp upgrade for Resto Shaman. And then lastly, the plate shoulders, which we talked about, not ideal. Not ideal. All right, so that's all the crafted items. Now it's time to get to trash, real boss loot. Let's get right into it. First up, we have Nether Void Cloak. This is a great item for both a Shadow Priest and a Warlock. The Shadow Priest, is really gonna just really likes the item. The Warlock potentially would be lower on the cloak because they do have a couple alternatives. Technically, most lists are going to show the haste cloak from Illidan as being the best, but that has healing on it and can be tough for Warlock to get. And when we get to it, you're going to see that I am not prioritizing it to Warlocks over healers. So this is going to be the cloak that Warlocks are going to be getting, and hopefully they're happy with this for quite a while. I think this cloak is very, very good if you can use the hit. The reason why I would potentially suggest Shadow Priest before Warlock is because, number one, Warlock gets a lot of tier. Warlock gets a lot of loot in general. And number two, Warlocks have another cloak they can use that has crit, even though it's more contested, from the Illidari Council. And some Warlocks are not going to want the hit in their build. Whereas Shadow Priests, if they have excess hit, they can change their talents, and also the alternatives for them aren't as good. And they really love just that really high shadow spell damage. So this cloak is great for both. I really do think Warlock should be happy with this. I say it's best for both. It is best in slot for Warlock if you use the hit. It is the best cloak for them if you use the hit. The only counter to this would be in an AoE build for trash damage. This would not be the best choice for a Warlock if they're focused on trash damage. But for single target boss damage, this would be best in slot for a Warlock if they can use the hit, which a lot of times they can change their set such that they can, but they might not be able to if they end up getting a hit main hand and offhand. But we'll get to that. Pepe's Cloak. This is a great cloak for a Prot Warrior. Give it to a Prot Warrior before your Feral. Yeah, really good. Ferals, a lot of times, you're still going to use an armor cloak or a cloak with defense. Keep in mind, this has no defense on it. So, yep. On to the Boots of Divine Light. These boots are healing boots. They have a ton of healing on them. You're going to see interest from lots of different classes that were using Orca Hide last phase. So really good for a lot of healers. Really high healing once you gem them up. You're going to see that it's just the same healing as Orca Hide, but this item has more spirit and way more stamina. So lots of people might be interested in this item, but I would say definitely Priest first, then Druid. Priests also die more. So this is an item that is going to be, the stamina I think makes the biggest difference on the Priest as well. But yeah, pretty much a side grade. And remember, Priests can't equip leather, so they didn't have Orca Hide to begin with. So that's what I would do for these boots. This chest is not very good. Give it to your Ellie if he wants it. He probably doesn't. But yeah, we'll move on. Choker of Serrated Blades. Now technically, there's several classes that could use this item, but mainly it's warriors and BMs that are going to want this. Most guilds aren't going to have enough of these drop necessarily that other classes would want them, so I really just listed warrior and BM. The problem with the other classes is they don't stack as much armor pen. So classes like Ret Paladin, Enhancement Shamans, Ferals, they don't have very much armor pen. So the more armor pen you get, the better it is. And if you're not stacking armor pen, yeah, not as good. But yeah, great item for warriors and BM hunters. This is going to be their BIS. Some sets might want hit on the next slot, but the vast majority of lists are going to use this for warrior and BM hunter. In terms of who should get it, yeah, biggest upgrade. Some might not even use this right away if they don't have enough armor pen to equip the item. I wouldn't really get too worried about this item. I would just give it, maybe give it to the guy who has the more armor pen, or give it to the guy who's missing a necklace. Maybe if one of your warriors didn't get the BIS neck from SSCTK, maybe if your hunter doesn't have the neck from the turn-in for the Tempest Keep last boss, the Verdant Sphere turn-in. So, yeah, I'd just say biggest upgrade. Not a big upgrade, but it is going to be BIS for both classes, and they want to stack up their armor pen. Next, we got a fire damage neck. Now, this is actually very good if you are playing fire. If you are a fire mage or a fire lock, this is a very good item. Most people aren't, though. But yeah, give it to your fire mages and your fire locks. Great item. Next, we have the Hammer of Judgment. This is an interesting item. I think that this item is you're gonna base this prio on how you do other items. I would say, objectively speaking, when we get to the sword from Archimonde, you're going to see that I prioritize the sword away from Prot Paladin. And I'll explain why when we get there. But because the Prot Paladin is not first on the sword, they're going to be first on the mace. This is a nice item for the Prot Paladin. Compared to the sword, this has more stamina, a tiny bit more DPS based on the item, but that doesn't matter too much. It has more hit rating, and it has no crit. And it does have less spell power, significantly less than the sword Tempest of Chaos. But I do think that this is an item that fits a Prot Paladin pretty well. The hit rating is actually it's not at all bad for Prot Paladin. So great item for Prot Paladin. For Shadow Priest, they might not need the hit, but of the remaining casters that could use it, they would be the class that uses this the best. The other two classes want the crit dagger. And while Shadow Priest, in some setups, might gain a little more from the crit dagger, they gain so little from crit that generally this is going to be more efficient on them. And then you've got Boomkin and Elemental. Elemental being last because they just really can't use the hit. So I'll just be honest with you. Most casters that get this item, it's going to be a nice upgrade potentially from previous phase, but this isn't considered a high tier weapon in the phase. So just keep that in mind that, maybe your Shadow Priest will be super happy with it, but this is not considered to be the cream of the crop. There is going to be a better weapon that we'll get to. Then we have these claws. They're really bad. They look really cool, but they're really bad. You can see they got a really cool effect. They actually match tier 5 enhancement armor really well, but they're bad. Maybe give them to a rogue for PvP or something if your hunter for some reason doesn't have a weapon. This is worse than the Alar offhand for stats, but if somehow you still don't have any good weapons on potentially a hunter or something, maybe they could use a stat stick, but yeah, really not a good weapon at all. Next, we have Rage Winterchill. This is the first boss of Hyjal. We're done with the trash loot. And first up, we have the Bracers of Martyrdom. I commented on these a little bit earlier. These are going to be good for both a druid and a priest. They are best in slot if you don't need haste as a druid. They're tied with the leather alternative, which are basically the same thing. And the priest, a lot of lists are using the haste risks over these, so they technically wouldn't be bis for the priest, but there's a lot of sets in which they could use them. Either way, if your priest is getting the haste risks, they can go ahead and pass these, but the druids have their own leather version as well. Your priest might want to slot into this item. And if they get this item, they could hold off on the getting the haste risks for a while, and since you'd be able to use the Heart of Darknesses on other items, that would also be beneficial. So I would say priest before druid, but definitely your priest should probably pass this item if they get their haste risks. And going to be good for a druid if they either haven't hit their haste breakpoint yet, or they are well over the haste breakpoint and they don't need haste on their wrist slot. So it's a little confusing, but if they don't need the wrists to hit 113 haste, they'd happily use these leather wrists or these cloth ones. Next, Cuffs of Devastation. Now this item has Spirit, Int, Crit, and Spell Power. Sounds like a arcane item to me. And indeed, it is best in slot for arcane mages, slightly better than the haste wrists, only considered bis for arcane. However, I could see other classes being interested in it, especially boomkins and elementals, if they're running out of mana and they don't want the haste from the other pair of wrists. So it might depend on your guild, but yeah, generally speaking, arcane, then boomy, then Ellie, then warlock, then Spriest. Spriest obviously doesn't want the crit. Warlock, really likes haste from the other wrist. Elemental doesn't use the spirit, and boomkin being second because they actually do use the spirit, especially if they're innervating themselves. Then we got Deadly Cuffs. These are best in slot for warrior. Again, there's several items that warriors can use in the wrist slot, but these right now are looking to be best in slot for warrior, so warrior should get them first. They also can go to an enhancement shaman, but enhancement shaman's got some crafted options, so I would say solidly warrior prio. You can give it to the biggest upgrade amongst the warriors, I guess, between arms and fury. So yeah, an item that could be used by hunter and rogue, but they really want a different wrist. So mainly just warrior, and then after that enhance. Rejuvenating Bracers, and these are not considered that great for a ret, by the way. Rejuvenating Bracers, again, we just discussed them. I'm going to skip over them, but yeah, we covered them with the previous ones. They're the healing leather wrists for druid. All right, Bracers of the Pathfinder. This item is not bis. Biggest upgrade. Whoever wants it. If for some reason was missing an item last phase, they can get it, but it's not bis. Just try and find someone to potentially get it. Now these wrists are actually not at all bad for an Archon, and even could be used by an H-Pal as well. The Resto Shaman is going to want the haste wrists, so if they can get their hands on those, they want those most, and there's a different plate wrist that comes out for a Paladin. So yeah, biggest upgrade, not a best in slot item, and might not get used if your healers already have, your Archon has their haste wrists. Next, we have the Stillwater boots. These are not great. Give them to whoever. By comparison to the trash boots that we looked at earlier, these have 84 healing. Those had like 70 something in 2 sockets. So you're going to be like down 30 healing equipping this boot. So not great. Bloodstained shoulders, not a Abyss item. It is potentially something that a warrior could use, especially if they didn't get Shoulders of the Stranger last phase. Yeah, just give it to the biggest upgrade. Doesn't really matter. Has hit on it. Maybe it'll help an arms warrior or a ret paladin that has a weird hit situation. But yeah, usually rets don't need hit because of their talents. Okay, these are the Holy Paladin wrists that I had just talked about a moment ago. These are the ones that Holy Paladins want, especially if they're going for that long sustained build. So yeah, give it to Holy Paladins. Bis in the Holy Light build. These wrists are not great. I've seen some lists that use them, mainly if they're looking to just be very tanky as a DPS. But yeah, DPS wise, they are not great. Survivability wise, they would have a decent amount of stamina in their plate. So not terrible, but yeah, give to Warrior Ret, whoever wants it. Tracker's Blade is not very good. Maybe try and find a home for this. Maybe you got a Dagger Rogue, I guess. They could use it in their offhand. Not a great item. Yeah. Would not be super excited to get that. Next, we have Chronicled of Dark Secrets. This is the offhand. This is best in slot, so a great item here. Is best in slot offhand. Now, who should get this? Generally speaking, you're going to want to give this to someone who is not going to get the staff. So hopefully you've decided in advance who's going to get the staff from Illidan. Obviously, we'll get to that. But if you have decided who's going to get the staff from Illidan, the book should be going to a caster that is not getting the staff, and ideally a caster that can make use of the hit. Warlock and Boomy are the most likely to make use of the hit. Mage is the least likely of those 3 to make use of the hit. Shadow is likely not going to use the hit or the crit and isn't even going to want this. In 99% of situations, they would not equip this item. And so, and Elemental Shamans want a shield. So it is best in slot for Warlock, Boomy, and Mage if they're using a one-hander in their main hand. But yeah, amongst them, I would say give it to the Warlock or Boomy that needs hit. Give it to whoever is not getting the staff. And Mage is going to be behind them because they don't need hit, especially transitioning from previous phase. Mages barely need any hit from gear. They get 10% hit from talents. All right, next, we're moving along. We're on Anetheron. All these random demon names in Hyjal. Can't wait to try and remember which is which. All right. Hate Fury Shoulders. These have Spell Pen on them. Kind of unlucky. Otherwise, a very good item until the Spell Pen. But yeah, still actually a reasonable upgrade from last phase for some of the classes that are breaking their set bonuses and stuff. So yeah, just give it the biggest upgrade amongst the casters. It's definitely not Bis, but it can be a nice upgrade. Next, we got Anetheron's Noose. This is best in slot for Mage. It is best in slot for Boomy. Some lists show it best in slot for Warlock. Most lists do not show it for Elemental, and no list has it for Shadow Priest. With that said, this is going to be a really nice item for Mage because it's got the int, the spell power, the crit. It's really good. All of these classes can use a haste belt, but some lists deviate between the two of which prefer the noose, which prefer the belt. I think the majority of these classes prefer the crit belt when it comes down to Bis, but Boomy and Warlock are going to be happy with the haste belt. Boomies have their own leather haste belt that drops that they can get as well. And Warlocks are chilling with the haste belt also. So Mage first because they're the one that is least likely to get the haste belt. And just the difference between the haste belt, Mage has the biggest difference in their gear set. But I wouldn't be blown away if a Mage said that they wanted the haste belt. Haste is a pretty fun stat. But yeah, Mage, Boomy, then Warlock on this one. And that's really just dependent on the haste belt that we'll get to. Next, we have the Archbishop's Slippers. This is Priest, then Resto Druid. This item is, it's an okay item. It is not best in slot. It's just got a bunch of spirit, bunch of int. And otherwise, pretty pedestrian item. I'm going to refresh real quick. I think my internet might have blipped. There we go. There's the slippers. And yeah, not great. Next, on to the belt. Don Alejandro's money belt. So this item is best in slot for hunters, but and in every single BIS list will show this belt. However, there is another belt that some sets are going to want more. There's a belt that has hit rating on it from Black Temple, from the Essence of Anger dude, the Reliquary fight. And if your hunter needs hit, and if your hunter's struggling for hit, you probably should not be giving him this item. You should give it to a different hunter, and make sure that that hunter that's struggling for hit gets the belt from Reliquary. So just want to mention that while this is best in slot for hunter, if they're struggling with hit, this is not the best option in the slot. And there's another really good belt that is from Reliquary that is on par with this belt. I would argue it's better than this belt if you need the hit. In a lot of cases, I can see it being better. But in the full BIS list, which has the Madness Trinket, which has hit rating, and the Illidan Ring, which has hit rating, items that you might not get right away, it does go for this belt because you don't need the hit. Now, let's say if you're deciding between BM Hunter and Survival, give it to the Survival because it's got a ton of agility, and Survivals really don't need the hit. After that, it is not best in slot for Ret or Enhance or Fury. All of these classes want the Vash belt, but these classes can use it if they don't have the Vash belt yet. Next, we have the Enchanted Leather Sandals. These are not best in slot. They're worse than Orca Hide. Not a great item. Moving on. Chest, again, another item that's not even good compared to last phase. Moving on. These boots, also not really very good. For Hunter, a lot of times they're just worse than last phase's boots unless you randomly need a ton of hit. But yeah, worse than tier 5 boots for Hunter. Same deal, Ret would never really want these unless they're in a really big bind with hit. This item is just not very good. Of all the classes, Enhancement could use them the most, but yeah, just not a great item. Next, we have the Glimmering Steel Mantle. This is a Holy Paladin item, and yeah, it's pretty good. It's a nice little item to hold you over while waiting for tier, potentially. But yeah, decent item for Holy Paladin. Not BIS, though. Next, we have Unbreakable Will. This is like a full mitigation sword that can be used in a full mitigation set. I would probably never use this item over a Maud of the Tides or the new weapon coming out with Expertise this phase. But hey, if ever there were a fight where a prot warrior is sitting in a corner tanking something and they don't need to have any threat at all, yeah, they could put this on technically. BIS mitigation. I don't know about you. I don't know if I really feel like putting Mongoose on this item for one fight ever. But hey, yeah, not a great item. It would get a little bit better for a human because it is a sword. But at the same time, lots of other items are swords and maces, including Maud of the Tides is a mace. So yeah, this thing sucks. On to Blade of Infamy. This is an interesting one. Best in slot for Fury and Survival and BM. Survival actually wants 2 of these. BM wants 1. And it's a stat stick upgrade for them. Now, the reason I put Rogue in the front is if by chance your Rogue is really struggling and still hasn't seen Talon drop, they definitely should get this because it's a huge upgrade for them. But hopefully most Rogues by now have the sword from SSE. And it's very comparable, almost identical to Blade of Infamy and DPS. So if your Rogue does have it, they're sitting pretty. They'll be okay. Warrior, again, if they don't have a decent offhand, this would be a big upgrade for the Warrior. And it would be a nice offhand for them. And offhands can be tough to get. So I would always look to see if you can get a big upgrade for your melee DPS before you give it to your survivals, your BMs. Now, keep in mind that this is good for Furies on Alliance side especially that are humans that have the expertise from the sword skill, but it's still great for Furies that aren't human as well. But if you are an Orc, this is not BIS in the offhand as a Fury. You want Rising Tide, and we'll get to that as well. But Rising Tide is going to be your BIS Orc axe. for offhand as a Fury. Survival wants 2 of these. Maybe you give the first to survival, or 1 to a survival, 1 to a BM, and then back to the survival. You could give both to the survival. I guess it just depends on the weapons that the hunters have. But yeah, survival would really want both of these eventually. And yeah, BM, they want 1 in their bis. So that's the deal there. And then if you do have a Fury Warrior that already has something like Talon, they would want the slight upgrade eventually, but they can probably wait after the hunters. But yeah. Down to Pillar of Ferocity, feral item, not much to say. Nice item for feral. It is best in slot if you're not PvPing. If you are PvPing, there is a gladiator weapon that has hit rating on it that has, the feral staff is really good. So that would be the best option, but not everyone is going to PvP for the staff. Next, we have Bastion of Light. This item is bis for Resto Shaman and bis for Holy Paladin. It depends. Holy Paladin has a crit shield they can use as well. It depends on the list exactly, but some lists are going to have this bis for H-Pal. Every list has a bis for Resto Shaman, and Holy Paladin has a different crit shield. So definitely prio this to Resto Shaman, but afterwards definitely get it to your H-Pal because it is bis quality, if not bis, close second bis for them. On to Kaz'rogal. We have Angelisa's Sash. This is a haste belt. It is best in slot for priest. There is another belt that has a spirit and healing on it, but most of the priest lists are opting for the haste. Druid also can have some use for this item, especially if they need haste, but druids have another option that is leather. Looks like it doesn't drop from this boss. Don't remember which boss it drops from, to be honest, but there is another leather belt that a druid can use to hit their haste. So this goes priest before druid. You could give it to a druid before priest if it hits their 113 haste if you wanted. Next, we got the legs. These legs are best in slot for a lot of classes. They're bis for Boomy, Elise, priest. Some mage setups they're bis for as well. Mage definitely gets the least and has tier that is very, very close to as good as this item. So it's kind of a waste to give it to a mage just in the sense that these other classes don't have a tier option that's like identical. The warlock is not going to use the legs unless they don't have vestments. If the warlock doesn't have vestments, they can use the legs. They probably should be using the Illidan helmet as their off piece, but the tier helmet for the warlock is one of the coolest items in the game and gives them wings. So good luck telling your warlock to use the Illidan helm over the tier helm when they miss out on the wing effect because they don't have vestments. So yeah, you might eventually get this to warlocks, but definitely Boomy first because they gain the most from the spirit on this item and they would get a bigger upgrade than Elemental. Elemental, this is still bis for them, but that spirit on the item is not going to do very much for them. The Shadow Priest isn't going to gain much from the spirit or the crit, so that's why they're third, even though it is their bis. It's the smallest upgrade for them. But this is the offset piece that each of these classes use, and they use the foreset. That's channeled elements. Next, blue suede shoes. This is not on any bis list except some paladin lists. And bear with me here. Some protection paladin threat lists actually use this item. It has high stamina, hit rating, high spell damage, and it's actually something that a prop paladin set could use when they don't care about survivability and they're just trying to pump out as much threat as possible. So you can give this to a prop paladin. You could give it to a warlock that needs hit. It's unlikely that many people are going to want to use this over something like a Boots of Blasting. So you might actually be giving this to your prop paladin for a threat set. But yeah, not a great item. Next, Razor Fury Mantle, very poor item. An item that is not even best in slot it's definitely not best in slot for anyone, but in a lot of cases, it's not even better than tier 5 options. So very bad item, and try and find a home maybe for it. It has a lot of stamina, but yeah, it's just not enough damage. Next, we have the belt. Now, this is going to be the haste and damage belt. Little weird that they have the 1 haste healing belt on this boss, and then 1 haste damage belt, and they don't line them up. But hey, who am I to say? Who am I to criticize Blizzard's designation of items? But yeah, this belt is not BIS for Boomkin, but it is pretty much near best in slot for a Boomkin. Elemental Shamans have another belt they prefer. They could use this to hold them over. But yeah, Boomkin first, then Elemental. And while we mentioned that the Boomkins might be interested in the crit belt, this is really the best option for them for a long time. And maybe eventually they'll get that crit belt from Anetheron's Noose. These boots can go to anyone. Not particularly great. They aren't the worst thing ever, potentially, for a rogue, but they do less damage than Edgewalker long boots, but you get more stamina. But yeah, not a great item. No one really wants it. Shoulders. This item is a little bit better than tier 5, not counting that effect at the bottom. A little bit better than tier 5 shoulders for a hunter. So early on, if you're a hunter and you break your tier set, you can bust out this item. The 2% pet crit chance thing is kind of cool. It's not a big deal. This item is definitely not BIS, definitely not even close to BIS. But yeah, it's a cool little item. And hey, it is what it is. Next, we have the Veilstalker Girdle. This item is also not BIS. This is the haste agility item. Not great for anyone. A Ret can use this if they don't have Vash Belt, and it's okay. But yeah, not really a great item. Sun Touch Chain Leggings. This item on paper is actually really good. It's basically Sunhawk leggings. It's better than tier 5, just to be clear. This says tier, better than tier 5 for a lot of the casters. And if you compare it to Sunhawk, it's 2 more healing, 3 more MP5, and you just lose a little bit of int. So slight potential upgrade over Sunhawk, pretty much the same item. Archon before HPAL, but yeah, just a temp upgrade there. Definitely can deviate from this depending on what items your raid currently has. This belt sucks. No one really wants it. Yeah, it is what it is. Next, we've got the Crit Healing Mace. Again, when it comes to healing weapons, it all comes down to like what weapons people currently have and what they're going to get. When we get to the Illidan Mace, Illidan Mace is not going to be prioritized to a Holy Paladin, and Holy Paladins do really like spell crit, and this is really just a great Holy Paladin weapon, and it suits them the best. So Holy Paladins are going to get it first. After that, again, the crit is okay for an Archon, so it can go to them after. Holy Priests don't use the crit nearly as much, but it's somewhat has some value, but not that much, whereas Resto Druid just really doesn't want the crit at all. So that's the order for this item. Pretty simple, to be honest, when you just think about how the crit works. But you can always deviate from this list depending on your healer's current gear. At the end of the day, that 443 healing is more important than the 23 crit. So if you do have like a Holy Priest that still is running around with like a reputation mace from whatever the rep in Shatrath is, if you've still got like a person with a healing rep item with, yeah, definitely go ahead and replace it, and it looks kind of cool. Prot Warrior. So this is a Prot Warrior shield. This is a very good item for Prot Warrior. If a Prot Warrior gets this item, they don't actually need Bulwark for a while. I mean, technically Bulwark of Azzinoth is better. It does have more armor. It does have more block, and they don't necessarily need the hit in a BIS setup, but this is definitely a very good item. And as someone who raids on a Prot Warrior, if I got Kaz'rogal's Hardened Heart, I would be passing Bulwark to the end of time to Prot Paladin, whoever needs it, basically the Prot Paladin. But yeah, really, really good item and close to BIS for Prot Warrior. Now we are on to the fun stuff. Azgalor. Yeah, it's not that fun. We're almost at the fun stuff. But yeah, we have Don Rodrigo's Poncho. Not a great item. It is what it is. Shady Dealer's Pantaloons. Another not great item. Another problem with this item is you probably want a lot of armor pen to get the most out of this. By the time you have the armor pen, you probably have a better item than this because this item's not very good. But this isn't BIS for anyone. Technically, a rogue could have some use over it, over something like Skulker's Greaves. once they're breaking all their set bonuses, but yeah, it's really not great. Yeah. Bow stitched legs. These are actually a very good item. These legs are best in slot for survival. They're best in slot for enhance. They're best in slot for ret, and they're second bis in a BM setup. They're best in slot for BM if they don't have cursed vision. So if you can't get cursed vision as a hunter, you're going to want these as well. So amazing item. When it comes down to it, again, that really high agility is just going to bias itself towards survival. So it should be survival prio, benefiting the whole raid with their buff. After that, enhance and ret, it's really neck and neck. I mean, both classes have kind of comparable options from the previous phase. Both classes, their tier is not something they really want in the leg slot. They're definitely not going to get it quickly. So I would say it's pretty equal. Could potentially give to the bigger upgrade, I suppose, between the two. But yeah, I would say pretty equal between enhance and ret. And then BM after. Again, BM last, hoping that they ideally get their cursed vision and don't even need this item, since it's not technically bis. Onward to Glory of the Defender. This item is terrible. You would give it to a Prot Warrior. I'd really hope they don't use it. Much worse than tier 5. This belt is bis for Holy Paladin in the Holy Light setups. They obviously have the haste belt alternative, but yeah, this is a great item for a Holy Paladin in a Holy Light build, which they should be playing. Next, we have the Armor Pen Dagger. This is bis for BM Hunter. Can prio it to your BM Hunters. I have heard some theory crafting potentially with this item in Fury. Maybe a Fury Warrior could use this in their offhand if they don't have another alternative. It wouldn't be as good in AoE because it would really reduce their whirlwind damage to have such a fast weapon, and because it's a dagger and daggers don't gain as much damage from abilities. So yeah, maybe potentially a Fury Warrior after, but yeah, BM Hunter to start. Now we get our first piece of tier, and we can discuss the tier. So I'm going to, at this point, talk about each of the sets for all of the classes, and then we'll talk about, the individual items. So let's talk about Paladins. Protection Paladins have, in my opinion, the best set in the tier. I think that 10% consecrate damage is easily the best set bonus. There's other set bonuses that are really powerful, but the biggest deal about the 10% consecration damage is this has the potential to really speed up your raids by quite a bit. Your Paladin having the Force set is really going to increase his threat in AoE, and you can get through trash much faster if your Prot Paladin is cranking out a lot of threat. So the Prot Paladin Force set is amazing. Individually, the Paladin items are very good as well. They have good spell power. They're statted well. So Prot Paladins tier is amazing. And I think Prot Paladins are definitely prio on their token. And I think they have the best tier of all the classes in this phase. Other Paladins, we have Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin has, and by the way, just a little mention, Prot Paladins can use 5 pieces of tier. Some sets will use an offset helmet in 4 pieces. They want their 4 set ASAP. So they should take the first 4 pieces that drop and just get the 4 set as soon as possible. But they can use a different helmet in potential bis. But some lists use mitigation helm as an offset piece. Some use all 5 pieces of tier. So all 5 pieces of tier are good, and they would be happy to get any of the pieces. Over to Holy Paladin. Holy Paladins do use the 4 set in bis. With the 4 set, they are going to be using everything but gloves, and they really like the 2 set for tank healing, and the 4 set is good for raid healing. So the set bonuses are pretty good. Again, the 2 set being the bigger one, because your tank, ideally they should be tank healing. But, let's just be honest. They're still going to be casting some Flash of Lights some of the time. And, just 5% healing on an ability like that. Quite good. Individually, the only catch with the items is that H-Pals do have some offset pieces that are very close. They have offset shoulders and an offset helm that are very close to being best in slot quality. They're like identical to the tier. So that's the only argument you could have against a Paladin, is that a couple of the pieces, once they get them, it's just such a small upgrade to get the tier if they have the offset pieces. So that's another knock against them, but their set bonuses are good, and the individual items are also good, and they want their 4 set, everything but gloves. On to Ret. Ret Paladin's tier is really bad. The legs are bad. The gloves are terrible. The shoulders are bad. The helmet and the chest are okay. The chest is close to Bis. The helm is not. But yeah, all things considered, ideally a paladin would be running 0 pieces of tier. That is Ret. The set bonuses are horrific. They're abysmal. And basically, yeah, just not even a thing. So really bad set bonuses. You maybe would use the chest in some sets, but that's pretty much it. The chest is decent. Nothing else is. So you might end up using tier helm if you just can't get anything better. But yeah, really poor. So Ret's going to be very low on tier. Then we can talk about Warlock. So we covered the Paladins, onto Warlock. The Warlock tier is very good. One of the best sets. Individually, the pieces are very good. The 2 set's useless, but the 4 set is very good. Just 4% Shadow Bolt damage. Obviously, their single target damage is increased by about 6% in this tier. I've heard varying things. Most consensus seems to be that Warlocks aren't going to immolate anymore and are just going to cast Shadow Bolts on bosses with this set. So it would be, around 6% increase in damage if they're just blasting their Shadow Bolts, right? So again, really good. What pieces they use everything but the chest if they have the vast chest. If they don't have the vast chest, they can use legs or head as their offset piece. They could even use haste shoulders and an offset piece too, but I think that's the worst option of the ones I just mentioned. But yeah, that is it. A really good tier, really good individually. They should be high prio on it. Generally speaking, across the board, they're just directly behind Paladin, except for the chest, which they're lower on because they have a bit, they should have vast chests, ideally. On to Priest. Shadow Priest and Holy Priest. Shadow Priest, unfortunately, all of the items are pretty bad. Really only the chest is individually good. Now the 4 set is good, but again, like I mentioned, when a lot of the individual pieces are bad, it's kind of rough to get them their 4 set quickly when you've got all your Warlocks gaining so much more, and not only is the 4 set better for Warlock, but the individual pieces are much better, and Prop Paladin is just so crucial. So it's going to be tough for the Shadow Priest. You're going to see throughout the video, we're going to be trying to give items to Shadow Priest in other places, but yeah, Shadow Priests are going to be pretty much back of the line on tier, because I think it's just going to be really difficult to justify giving them tier quickly when individually the pieces are so poor. But yeah, ideally in Bis, they're going to use the 4 set, everything but the legs. If they really need the haste from the haste shoulders that are crafted from tailoring, they could run the 4 set with everything but shoulders, but that would be a little bit worse. Holy Priest, when it comes to the Holy tier, their set bonuses are not great. Their individual items are all Bis across the board, except for legs. So they would use a lot of the pieces, but they just no set bonuses. So they're going to be they're going to be behind several classes, but it just is what it is. Now, for this particular token, Holy Paladin doesn't actually use the gloves. Their 4 set is everything but gloves. So normally Holy Paladins would be a little higher on tier, but they don't actually want this item, so they're back of the line. And yeah, then it's just following kind of the order of that we just kind of established, of Prop Paladin being prio first and foremost, Warlock being right after because it's really good, Priest gaining the benefit of at least the stats on the item, and then Shadow Priest waiting on this one for a little bit longer because they really do need the full set to make use of any of this tier, except the chest. All right, on to the gloves that are Shaman, Hunter, Warrior. Let's talk about each of the sets. So let's start with Shaman. The Elemental Shaman set is very good. The 2 set, whenever you have an air totem, an earth, a fire, and a water. So basically, when you have all your totems out, you gain 15 mana per 5, 35 crit, 45 spell damage. That's insane. Individually, the items are good, but that set bonus is really, really, really powerful. I think it might not seem as good as you might think. I mean, those stats are very good. When you look at something like a 6% Shadow Bolt damage, it's really obvious how good it is. And obviously this 2-set is not as good as that, but you'd be surprised actually how much damage this is. It's a very big increase. Those stats are huge. Ellies love crit. Very, very good set bonus. And then the 4-set is 5% Lightning Bolt damage. So this set's amazing and very good for Elemental Shamans. I think it's really nice to put Elemental Shamans decently high on tier because if you remember, in last phase, your Elemental Shaman was still using tier 4 Head and Shoulders to support the raid with spell damage. So I think as a nice thank you, it'd be good to get them their tier fairly early, and the set bonuses are amazing. And you usually only have one Shaman, so it's not too hard to get an Ellie their set pretty quick. This is going to be one of those times where speed running guilds are going to deviate from what I'm recommending here. When I conclude with all of these, I'm going to say that Elemental Shaman overall on the tier as a whole should get their tier second across the token. And, a lot of speedrunning guilds would not be doing this. It's not optimal for speedrunning, but I really do think on a personal individual basis, it is very good for Elemental Shaman and an amazing upgrade. And only one person to give it to most of the time, one or two. So I think this is great for Ellie. On to the next one, the Resto set. The Resto set bonuses are also insane. Chain Heal, 10% less mana on your Chain Heal is disgusting. And then 5% more healing on your Chain Heal is also disgusting. And individually, the tier is very good as well. Resto Shamans are going to use 4 pieces of tier, everything but gloves. This set bonus is amazing. Very, very good set bonuses and really good items all around. So great for Resto Shaman. Next, we have the enhancement set bonus. Your shocks cost 10% less mana, and then when you Storm Strike, you gain some AP for 12 seconds. The 4-set doesn't sound too bad on paper, but the reality is the individual items are too poor to warrant using it. Unfortunately, for the Shaman, basically all of the tier is bad. The best piece of tier is Helm. It's not Bis, but the only reason why you would potentially use it is because Cursed Vision might be hard to get in some cases. But yeah, the gloves are bad, the legs are bad, the chest is bad, and the shoulders, you guessed it, they're pretty bad. So they're going to be last on pretty much every piece of tier. On to Hunter. Hunter, individually, there's a couple pieces of Hunter tier that aren't like individually best in slot. There's other options that are going to be better from the new upcoming phase. There's some tier 6 items that are better, but the gloves are great, the shoulders are great, and the 4-set is great. So I do think Hunters are a great candidate to get this item pretty early. You might see a lot of speedrunning guilds giving this to Hunters first. You definitely can give a Hunter this tier very early. I am going to lean towards giving Resto Shamans and your Elemental Shamans their tier sooner because they individually really like all 4 of the pieces and are gaining huge benefits from the set bonuses, and I just think the set bonuses are more potent for them, and individually they would probably really benefit a lot from them. Hunters get a lot of loot as well. In this phase, there's 2 new bows coming out, and when we get to a lot of the contested items, you're going to see that Hunters do pretty well on some of the contested items. So Hunters get a decent amount of loot, and I think that these other classes benefit more from their set bonuses. So again, in a non-speedrunning guild, I would say Hunter is going to come up third after those 2 classes, but I definitely can see some guilds giving this first, depending on your goals as a guild. But yeah, good individually, good pieces. They run everything but Helm if they can get the Illidan Helm, the Cursed Vision of Sargeras. If they cannot get the Cursed Vision of Sargeras, they're going to run everything but legs and then run those bow stitched legs we talked about. Was that just right here? Yeah, these bow stitched legs. On to Warrior. So for Warrior, let's talk about Prot. Protection Warrior tier is abysmal. It is extremely bad. The Prot gear mostly has shield block rating on it. From the tank token, you're going to use 1 piece of tier in Bis, and that's the legs. Now you are going to use some of the Fury options. You're going to use the Fury chest and the Fury shoulders. But yeah, again, 3 total pieces of tier in BIS. 1 is the tank version. You actually use the DPS versions because the prot tier is so bad. It's just really bad for a prot warrior. It's really unfortunate. It is what it is. It's just terrible. If you're a prot warrior, you should be hopefully happy with a lot of the offset items that you get for free because, yeah, not only are the prot pieces of tier terrible, except the legs, but even the Fury items you use are very small upgrades. So prot's going to be low on tier across the board. They do use those 3 pieces I mentioned: tank legs, DPS shoulders, DPS chest. They can use helmet if you're struggling to get the Illidan helm to drop, but again, it's not particularly great. Yeah, that's that. So overall, when it comes to tier in general, I'm going to be prioritizing the Resto Shaman set first, then the Elemental, then the Hunter. I could see Elemental going first. I could see Hunter going first. I need to mention Fury and Arms as well. There's 2 different builds of Fury. One build goes for 4 pieces of tier, everything but the legs. And another build is just full offset pieces and uses offset everything but chest and shoulder. If you're going to play the 4 set of the tier, which Arms is most likely to play, Arms is mainly going to be playing with the 4 set version, and Fury is going to potentially have the choice to play the offset version. The offset version does more damage, and the tier set's a little bit tankier. So with that said, between your DPS warriors, generally give it to Arms before Fury when it comes to the tier tokens. And this glove is best in slot in the 4 set setup. It is not best in slot if you're using Cursed Vision of Sargeras and the offset leather pieces, like the chest. Well, I guess you really don't use that much leather, but really just Cursed Vision and the helm. But yeah, if you're using the offset approach, offset gloves, offset head, you don't give these to Fury. Now you can still give that to him because all of these classes it's not BIS for. So Resto Shamans are going to use everything but gloves. Enhancement Shamans don't want this. Prot Warriors don't want a tier glove. And so you're able to still get this after the Ellie and the Hunter. So that's how we're doing tier for that token. Then we get to the last token here. That's going to be Feral, Rogue, Boomy, Mage, Arcane, Druid, and then another Mage. And this is only if they need hit. I'll explain that in a second. So first up, Feral. Wow. Feral's set bonuses are disgusting. If you read the 2 set, increases the threat generated by your Mangle in bear form by 15%. So that's right. Your bear just got a 15% threat increase to their primary snap threat ability at the start of a fight. And yeah, obviously amazing. High prio to get them the 2 set ASAP. Now the 4 set increases the damage dealt by your swipe, at least in bear form, by 15%. That's going to help them in AoE, as well as single target. So that's a nice option. As bears get more geared, swipe becomes the play in terms of single target threat as well. So it's already in their single target rotation, and now it does more damage. So really, really good set bonus. Immediately give all these pieces to your druid. They can equip all 5 pieces. If they're a PvPer, they can use the PvP helmet in 4 offset pieces. But generally speaking, you'd even give the helmet to your Feral early because this isn't as contested of a token, and you want your Feral to get the set bonuses really fast. So all 5 pieces are going to be going to the Feral very fast. By some luck, if you just don't see a helmet for a long time and your Feral ends up getting the PvP helm, then yeah, you don't have to give them the helmet. They can use the other 4. Onto gloves, or onto, I guess, the rest of the druid specs. Boomkin. Boomkins want the 4 set. They run everything but legs. They do need to kind of put together the 4 set. They don't immediately want to break their tier 5 4 set. So They're going to need to collect a few pieces, so they're not going to be right ahead on it. But yeah, their set bonus for the 4 set is good, and individually the items are pretty good. Something to note for Boomkins is their tier has a lot of hit on it, so that's going to change how you gear this phase. On to Resto Druids. Resto Druids use just a couple pieces of tier. They use the head, the chest, and the shoulders, and some setups won't use the shoulders and will use haste shoulders. But for gloves, you definitely want to use haste gloves. And for legs, they want the leggings of eternity. They actually have a couple good leg options, but they don't want to use tier legs. You can see the 4 set is completely useless. The 2 set's something, but yeah, the 4 set is completely useless. So not a big priority to get them their tier. And they're going to be pretty much towards the back because their set bonuses aren't as good. And individually, they don't gain a ton from each of the pieces. But yeah, they still do want chest, head, shoulder eventually. And then we get to Rogue. Rogue has the 2 sets strong, the 4 sets strong, the individual pieces are strong. In best in slot gear, the Rogue is going to use everything but the helm. Rogues are probably not going to get the helm super fast unless there's just an individual in the guild that really likes the look of it or something. But yeah, Rogues are probably not going to get the Cursed Division of Sargeras anytime soon. So Rogues are likely to use all 5 pieces of tier. The best pieces of tier are the gloves and the shoulders. The chest is really good as well. The head is good if you don't have Cursed Division of Sargeras, and still a big upgrade from previous phase. Really, the legs are the smallest incremental increase from last phase, only slightly better than previously. Even something like Skulkers, it's not a big difference from that, but it's still best in slot. And the set bonuses make it such that the Rogue is going to want their tier pretty fast. Onto Mage. If you're playing Arcane Mage, they're actually going to still use tier 5 4 set, and they usually run everything but legs. And then they run tier 6 legs. If you happen to be a mage that is struggling with hit, which can happen, none of the tier 5 gear has hit on it that you use across head, shoulder, chest, glove. In some situations, you actually can have hit issues as an Arcane Mage. If you have full Bis, you get Zardoom, and you don't get Skull of Gul'dan. You can actually weirdly need hit, and if you do, you just swap to the gloves. So you might have an Arcane need gloves. If that's the case, they can even leapfrog like Resto Druid since they're not even Bis. But yeah, typically not great for Mage. So that's it. I'm not going to reiterate the tier anymore of why, how I feel about the set bonuses. So just keep in mind from this point forward, we're just going to be mentioning on if the class actually uses that particular piece of tier when we're looking at tier. On to Archimonde. This chest sucks. Not very good. Give it to whoever might want it. Not great. Leggings of Eternity. We've talked about these. These are best in slot for Priest and Druid. Priest should get prio on them because Druids have a leather alternative. Yeah, not too complicated. These are individually a strong enough item that H-Pals and Arshams can definitely be interested in these, especially if they don't have their tier yet, especially if they don't have their tier set bonuses going. So definitely a great item for all healers, but yeah, prio to Priest before Druid for sure. Midnight Chest. This is best in slot for Enhancement and Ret. You could say it's equal between Enhancement and Ret. The upgrade is a little bigger for Enhancement right out the gate, and Enhancement's tier is also worse by comparison. Now, Ret Paladin's not getting their tier anytime soon, but I would much rather have an Enhancement Shaman, have Midnight Chest equipped, and then eventually give Ret tier chest than the inverse, where you have an Enhance having to use their tier chest, and the Ret has the Midnight. So that's why I would mention it, but you could give it to the Ret if they need the chest more. Next, we have the Mail of Fevered Pursuit. Also, another thing to mention, if your enhancement doesn't have an offset piece, like Bloodsea Brigand chest, or even chest of like Ranger General from tier 5, if their best chest option is the tier 5 chest, when they're breaking set bonuses, like the tier 5 chest is like so much worse than this. It's a massive upgrade. So another thing to think about. All right, Mail of Fevered Pursuit. This is an item that is usable by a Ret. It's actually better for Ret than Hunter and Enhance. So definitely something that you could use as a ret if you're waiting for Midnight Chest Guard. Another reason why Enhance could potentially be leaned first on this item is because this item is better for ret than Enhance. Also something that could be used by a hunter, but not particularly great. Not a great item for hunter or Enhance, really. Not sure why so many of these items are bad, considering it's an end boss. What's going on, Blizzard? But yeah, Savior's Grasp, also not good. H-Pal, not good. Leggings of Endless Rage. This is an item that is also not best in slot. Can give to either a ret or a warrior. Biggest upgrade. Your rets probably don't need to hit from this. If they do, they can have it, but yeah, they probably don't need to hit from this. So yeah, probably just a temp upgrade for a warrior most of the time. Just give to whoever wants it, not Bis. Scepter. Speaking of not Bis, this is Bis. This is a very, very good offhand. It is the best offhand that you can pair with any one-hander. Prio to Priest over Druid, because Druids are going to be prioed a staff. So it would make sense to not give an offhand to a Druid, because they're going to use a staff. So there's that. Pretty easy. Yeah, very good indeed. On to Tempest of Chaos. So this is probably the first contentious item. We talked about it a little bit before with the mace for Paladin. I personally think that Paladins should be okay taking a backseat on this item. If your Paladin, for whatever reason, just doesn't have a weapon still, potentially could get the first one, I guess. But I really do feel that Paladin is getting a ton this tier. Paladins are going to get all 5 pieces of tier first. They're going to get a ton of uncontested loot on their Bis list. They have offset wrists, offset belt, offset boots, all items they're basically getting for free. I mean, they get everything they want pretty much. I think that Paladins should be fine not getting Tempest of Chaos. I really do think that if you are a speedrunning guild, there's a decent chance you're going to give it to a Paladin to try and just push as much as possible. But your Paladin is getting so much this phase. They get the 10% Consecrate damage. They get a lot of spell power on their gear. The Paladin does not need this to hold threat. And I do think that this is, specifically caster weapons are going to be drama this phase. And the more Tempest of Chaoses that you can spread amongst the mages and warlocks, I think the less drama you're going to have as a guild. And I think that's important to think about. So I would say mage and warlock before prop Paladin. Now, ideally, you'd like to give this to someone who needs hit. In Bis gear, neither class needs hit per se. If warlock is missing hit from any of their Bis, this could be really good for them. If mage has, their Bis, a lot of times they can use the hit from this, but they wouldn't necessarily need the hit from the offhand. So it's pretty much equal, honestly. Every way you slice it, I think it's pretty equal. When we come to Zardoom, mage and warlocks are also going to be equal. It really just depends on weapons. You want to be given these big weapons to the classes that are going to benefit the most. And from the weapon upgrade, the classes that have been waiting for an upgrade the longest, and your best players. I really would stress that Tempest of Chaos in the offhand is very close to Zardoom. The biggest difference would be trash damage. Haste is very good on trash, but Tempest of Chaos and Zardoom they're very close. We'll cover to the staff, but yeah, they're equal on the staff as well. I think it's just choose based on players. Some people are going to want the one-hander, some aren't. Some people are going to have just weird hit issues. If you got a warlock that just randomly has huge hit issues, give them this. This is really going to help their hit situation. Can give them the offhand, and that's it's like 34, 35 hit rating between the main hand, offhand combo in this phase. That's a huge deal if you're struggling with hit. So obviously no one else can use this besides mage, warlock, paladin, but that's how this is going to be done. And that's the reasoning. Onward to Cataclysm's Edge. This is better for arms than ret. Arms stacks armor pen, ret doesn't. So better for arms than ret. Bis for arms, not bis for ret. Great item for an arms warrior. Apostle of Argus. This is a nice item. This is going to go to Resto Druids because the Bis one-hander in the phase doesn't really work too well for Resto Druid. So we'll get to Crystal Spire when we get to Illidan, but you're going to see that the Crystal Spire of Kerebor is not very good for a Resto Druid, and specifically the part at the bottom. If a target's below 50% health, your direct healing will cause you to be healed for an additional amount. Hots ticking don't count as a direct heal when your life bloom is ticking on the person. So this is just not very effective for a Druid, and for that reason, they're going to get the really good staff, and they just really use it the best of any class. So Apostle of Argus is going to go to Resto Druid. After that, it can go to Priest. Again, probably want to give it to the people that are not getting Crystal Spire, and then ideally maybe people that don't have Light Fathom yet. So that is how Apostle of Argus is going to go. Next, we have Antonidas' Aegis. This is an amazing shield. This is Elemental Shaman Prio. It is best in slot for them. Now, some speedrunning guilds are going to give this to a Paladin first. So another mention there, if you're in a really hardcore guild or a really big speedrunning guild, this is a really good shield for a prop Paladin threat set. It does have very high armor and high block. It has the same armor and block as Bulwark of Azeroth. You'd lose a lot of stamina, but you'd gain a lot of spell power. So you'd also lose defense. But yeah, this is a great shield for a Paladin threat set, but it is not good for mitigation. So just keep that in mind. Elemental Shaman, then Pally, but some hardcore guilds can give it to Pally. Hopefully your Paladin gets something like the Illidari Rune Shield, though. If he gets the Trash Shield, then I would say you definitely want to make sure your Shaman gets Antonidas' Shield if your Paladin gets the spell power option from Trash. Next, we have the Bristle Blitz Striker. This is going to be BM Hunter before Survival. I'm not going to lie, I'm not a Hunter expert, to the degree of knowing why the bows go a little differently, but I trust the Veramos Bislists and stuff, so they have Survival using the bow from Illidan that has an MP5 proc, and the Bristle Blitz Striker is Bis for the BM Hunter. So just make sure this one goes to BM and the other one goes to Survival. Helm of the Forgotten Conqueror, tier helms. So we've already talked about the sets, and so there's not going to be a lot of surprises here. Prot, their tier helm's great, and they really want the set bonuses, so Prot is still getting that. Warlock, again, their tier helm's great. Their tier helm's really cool, too. Remember that this is the tier helm that gives the wings animation for your Warlock, so every Warlock is really going to want this tier helm. When we get over to the rest of them, again, Holy Paladin benefits from tier more than something like a Holy Priest, and Shadow Priests, again, struggle to get their bonuses, so we're going to go pretty much follow the value of the items and the value of the set bonuses, with Priest, Holy being above Priest, because it's just tough to assemble that set. Again, Ret last, because of all these helms, that's the only one that's not best in slot. On to the next helm. We're following that tier we discussed earlier of Ret Elemental Survival, or Ret Elemental Hunter. In this case, Survival Hunter does want this helmet rather than Cursed Vision of Sargeras. So Survival does a little bit of a different setup than BM. That's why BM is lower on the helmet. Arms Warriors are going to want the helmet that is the tier helmet for their 4 set if they're going for that setup. And again, any Fury that's going for 4 set wants the helm as well. We're going to get to Cursed Vision of Sargeras. I have Hunters higher than Warriors on Cursed Vision of Sargeras, so Warriors are higher on tier helm to make up for that. When it comes to the Sky Shatter cover, for enhancement, they can use this helmet. It's not as good as Cursed Vision of Sargeras from Illidan, but sometimes you're not going to get that. So, yeah. Last is Prot Warrior, of course, whose tier is bad and not Bis. They would want the tank helm from Illidan. Or even a PvP item in this slot, to be honest. All right, Helm of the Forgotten Vanquisher. Feral sticking with Prio, Rogue following it up. Again, this is not technically best in slot for a Rogue. If you happen to be in a guild where your Rogue gets Cursed Vision, they don't need this anymore. If you happen to be in a guild that's going to give this to a Rogue for whatever reason, if he thinks it looks cool, all that jazz, even though I'm not going to place Rogues high on Prio, if your rogue is getting this fast, they don't need to get to your helm as quick. But most of them aren't. Most rogues are going to be pretty low on the cursed vision. So they're going to get their tier helm pretty fast and get those set bonuses active. Again, Boomkins want their set bonuses. They're next. Resto, it is BIS for them, but their set bonus is the worst. And then we've got the Mage Helm, which is not great. Even if you're something like a Fire Mage, I would generally probably recommend a Fire Mage go for the Illidan Helm, and that would give them the 4 set with the least competition on the offset piece, so they get that helm. But yeah, that is it for Mount Hyjal. So we got through Hyjal, and I think that's going to wrap it up for part 1. I'm going to do part 2, probably release it in the next day or two for those of you watching right as it's released. For those of you in the future, it's already out. Check it out. It'll be linked in the description below. But that's it for part 1. Part 2 will finish off Black Temple. So thanks for watching, guys, and see you next time.